Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the session of Build AI Powered MVPs with Google AI Studio, organized by Adaptex Academy. This is our second session. Our first section was Building MVPs with Claude. My name is Raval, and I'm your moderator for today's session. And as you know, these sessions are part of AI capacity building for workforce transformation and digital readiness under AI Opportunity Fund for Asia Pacific, an initiative of ABPN with support from Google and Asian Development Bank. And we at Aptex Hub are the local training providers to implement this project. And today, this session focuses on Google AI Studio, where you will learn how you can build MEPs from an idea to a working application. And as usual, for the few housekeeping points, please make sure that your microphone is muted to avoid any background noises. And you may post your question in the chat, and we will be addressing them in our Q&A segment. Also, we will be recording the session for our learning and attendance purposes. And we request you all to please stay connected with us throughout the session, because at the end, we will be having a group photo. And now let me introduce our speaker for today. As you know, Dr. Zafi Sharhan Sayed is an AI expert. He holds PhD from Cardiff University, UK, with an extensive experience in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And throughout his work, Dr. Zafi focuses on helping individuals and organizations to use AI tools productively, effectively in real-world context. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Zafi. And Dr. Zafi will now guide us to today's session on building minimum viable products. So while we are delivering this session, please make sure that you write down your questions. And we will be having a separate segment where you may unmute yourself, or you can write down the questions in the chat. So Dr. Zafi, the floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Zafi Sharhan, and this is the second session on building MVPs using AI. I'll just share my screen so that we can get started in earnest. So if you recall, in the previous session, we used Claude Code in order to create an MVP using vibe coding, and that was in the form of a budget tracker web application. That application had inputs and outputs as well as a dashboard. In this session, we want to take a look at another popular tool for AI-assisted MVP development called as Google Studio. As the name suggests, this is a Google product. So you'll have a flavor of a product from Anthropic called Claude Code in the previous session. And in this session, we'll look into how Google AI Studio stands out. So if you want to get started with Google AI Studio, the first thing would be to just Google search for it if you do not know the URL already. So let me write Google AI Studio, and you can just log in with your Google account. So Google AI Studio is, in most parts, a free browser-based tool that allows users to build applications using Gemini models. These are models from Google, using what we call as vibe coding. So the idea is that you can develop applications by writing in plain language what you want to see. Now, Google AI Studio is actually quite a diverse tool in the sense that you can do a lot of stuff just from a browser-based tool. So if you want to create web applications, you can write, I want to create a web application, and then you can go ahead and describe what type of web application you want to create. But what you could also do is that through Google AI Studio, you can create an Android application. So this would be not a web application. It would just reside on your phone initially. But if you want to later on publish it on Google Play Store, you could do that as well. Another feature which is available here is that you can create applications that are built on top of Google products, most of which we already use in our daily lives. So for example, Google Drive, Google Sheets, Gmail, Calendar, and there are so many other tools that you can just build on top of. Additionally, in Google AI Studio, you can also play around with some of the features that are available, some of the products that are available used in the Google ecosystem. So it's aptly named as Playground. And if you click over here, you'll see you can do a variety of things. For example, you can write code or chat just as how you would do in Gemini. You could generate images, you could create videos, you could create speech and music, and you can also test out systems which are live chats. So it's almost as if you have Gemini installed on your phone, you can speak with Gemini real time and it's going to answer you. This is something similar. Now, there are features which are available for free. For example, if you click on Code and Chat, Gemini 3.6 Flash is their newest model, so you can select that. And then you can begin to type and chat with it. So this is one of the things, and it's free. You can just test it to a certain limit. But there are also features which are actually paid, so you need to buy credits in order to use them. For example, tools like Veo. So for these, you would have to buy subscription. And using that subscription, you can generate videos, for example, using this tool within Google AI Studio. Now, what we want to do is, of course, develop these minimal viable product applications so that we can see how well, if you have an idea, let's try to develop and bring it into a realization. Now, what we want to look into is create applications in Google AI Studio in two different contexts. So first of all, how do we create application? We'll just click on new app, and then we can begin to write whatever application we want to create, sort of similar to how we did it in Claude Code. So we want to look at two contexts of using Google AI Studio. The first context is we will create a fresh web application in Google AI Studio. And then we will use AI Studio to also host our application on the internet. So of course, we can develop applications, but the real use would be if we can share our application with other people and just try to get feedback from them. What are the good aspects and which aspects require improvement? The good thing about Google AI Studio is that you can do all that without leaving the environment, the interface of the AI Studio. And that is what we'll be doing first. In the second context, we will take the application that we developed last week, which we did not host to the internet, and we'll find a way that we can bring it to the Google AI Studio environment. So we'll try to look into both aspects of MVP development. Now, let's get started with it. So in order to get started, I'll start from one of the things which I asked in the previous session, where I asked people, how does an MVP web application look like in your domain? Now, some people typed the answer in the chat, and of course, there were some people who actually used the Google form. And I'll pick up an application from here, and I'll try to take an application that we can actually develop in the time that we have. Now, whenever we are developing web applications or even Android application using the vibe coding approach, we typically have to go through several iterations before we get what we desire. Similar time would also be required if we were to go for a professional web developer. In fact, in some cases, it could actually be greater time. So let's look into the replies that we got. From a myriad of responses, something which I find would be useful for everyone would be like an everyday to-do list. So this seems like a simple enough thing that we can do within the duration of the session. That is, we can create an app from start, and then we can also deploy it. Some other proposals are also quite interesting. So for example, an EdTech MVP, which should have user authentication, so a login for students as well as teachers, and then a dashboard to view the available courses, video lesson players, and a basic quiz system. Now, I would say this is a proper MVP, but given the duration of these sessions, it might not be possible for us to develop the entire thing. So we'll try to go for something simpler. But what I will take from the suggestion is the process of authentication. So perhaps what we can go for is an everyday to-do list, and then we can also add authentication and synchronization. Now, in this particular session, I would like to limit us to app development as well as hosting the app on the internet. In the next session, which is scheduled for Saturday, we look into authentication, synchronization, and so on. There were some other suggestions as well, but I think let's just go for something that we can complete within one session. So let's get started. What we are therefore wanting to do is to create a web application which is for a to-do list. So let's get started. And the way vibe coding works, and this is something that we talked about last week, is that we must not provide the entire idea in a single prompt. We have to feed it information in chunks. And that generally gets us the best results. So let's write something like this. I want you to create a web application for an everyday to-do list. So I'll try to add the same description that we had here verbatim so that things work out as we want to. So what you'll notice is that AI Studio sort of thinks ahead of us, and it's suggesting me an autocomplete that says, I want you to create a web application for an everyday to-do list that syncs across all devices and allows for custom task prioritization. Now, this is something that I had in mind, but today we are not going to implement the synchronization aspect. So let's say I want to create a web application for an everyday to-do list. And what else should this be? So let us add an application from which, let's say, we can take inspiration from. So for example, Google Keeps has a to-do list. So perhaps we can write the application can take inspiration from Google Keep. If you have another application that you like and you want to build something similar to that, you can write that take application from that particular application. It can take inspiration from that. Now let's also talk about a couple of features that we want it to have. Now, although Gemini would know how Google Keep works, and it would know what features are present, it's always a good idea to sort of nudge it into the direction that we want it to be. So I'll write something like, here the user can create notes with checkboxes that can be marked as completed. Some of the other features could be the user can edit notes, they can delete notes. Now we can go ahead and write some of the other features. For example, if we are creating notes, maybe in terms of priority, I would like notes to be colored. So if it's something important, that note should be colored red. If it's not really as important or as high in priority, it could be of a color green. But for now, I'll just stick with what we have and I'll click on build. So I just want it to build a template. And once we have an idea in front of us, we can iteratively try to improve that application. So let's click on build. Now, if you're using Google AI Studio for the first time, you may want to go to the settings option and then select the model to use. I'm using the free tier, and in the free tier, you do get some usage of their pro model. It has been some time since Google has released a newer model, so it's still better to stick with the pro version as opposed to the flash version. So as always, and when we are prompting AI to write code, we sort of have to wait for it to go through the processes. And it will iteratively go through different things, and eventually it would provide us a code for the app, as well as different previews. So this is something which is unique to Google AI Studio in the sense that it would, at the very start, it would ask you, how do you want the app to look like? And these would just be some predefined settings from which you can select. So you have a couple of choices over here. The first choice is to just say, right, you like a particular design, but even if you don't want to take a decision at this point, you can skip it for now. You will see that this option, the design selection option, comes later on as well. And this is what I would recommend as well. To let AI generate a code, you see how well it works or does not work. And later on, you can go ahead and optimize the design. Because this particular web application should not be too difficult to create, I am expecting this run to be completed relatively quickly. One of the main advantages that you will see from Google AI Studio as opposed to, let's say, Claude Code is that everything is on the cloud. So you don't need to actually install anything in order to create web applications. And this is especially useful if you are a beginner. So you don't need to install any software, for example, Claude, or if you are working with Codex from OpenAI, then again, you need to be installing stuff. So with AI Studio, everything can just occur on the cloud. So as expected, it has created an application. We can read through its summary, what it's done. But if we click on preview, we'll see how the application looks like. Now let's just test it out. So let's create a new node. And let's say we have something on the end of groceries. And let's say we have item 1, item 2, item 3. Can we mark a particular item as complete? The checkbox seems to be working. And we can also set a color. Let's add another node. So this could be node 2. And let's say this has item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. And let's give it another color as well. So I think this actually looks quite good. It might not have some of the features of Google Keep. That is, you cannot drag the nodes. But I think this actually looks pretty good right in the first go. So this is sort of giving us quite a good first instance development. In some cases, you might be lucky and you get a generation which is very close to what you desire. But if we are going for something which is quite a new idea, then you may require several iterations. Now, in this case, it was quite a deliberate attempt from me that for to-do list, I specifically told the AI that I want it to be of similar inspiration as Google Keep. Now, we can do other stuff. For example, you can think of new features that you want to have. For example, a feature could be to add search. But what AI Studio would also do is to propose its own features. So for example, it says, do you want to add search? So that you don't need to look for a particular node. You can just use a filter in order to search for it. Or for example, pinning important nodes. Some of the other things that have been suggested are add node colors, but that's already been incorporated. We can also archive nodes. We can add delete confirmation as well. So if I were to delete this, it just gets deleted and there is no confirmation. If I wanted to, I could add that feature. So let's at least add one more feature, and that could be the feature of search. So let's go ahead and do that. So the prompt it generates itself is implement a search bar in the header that filters displayed nodes based on the title or the content text matches. So let's run that. So again, this is quite a simple task, and I don't really expect it to be taking too long. Now, until that happens, let's look at some of the other features which are available. So we can go here and we can think of different aspects. So let's say I don't really like this design. I can click on this edit tool, and then I can click on designs. And what it would do is it would generate for us different variations of this design. So if you have something in mind, that's wonderful. But if you are sort of going blank and you don't really know what could be other possibilities, you can ask AI Studio to design other variations. So this is our original variation. This is variation number 1. If you're happy with this interface, wonderful. If you're not, you can click on variation. Let's go for variation number 2. If you like it, then you can go ahead and click on submit. But if not, you can look into some of the other options as well. If you don't really like the variations or the designs that are proposed by Gemini, you can also propose your own suggestion. So for example, if I don't really like their designs, I can say propose to me more colorful design variations. And then click on generate. So what you'll see here is, in addition to the original design, a couple of designs that Gemini had suggested earlier, you also have designs that you sort of guided towards. So when I said propose to be more colorful designs, this is a new design that Gemini has suggested. So it just depends on you what you actually end up liking. So let's say we actually do like this. You click on submit, and what I'm expecting is that I'll get the new design for my web application. Now, what you'll notice is earlier we had asked to add the search option. So it has added the filter for search. We'll just wait it for finishing this process, and then we'll try to search for items, for example, groceries in the search notes bar. So this shouldn't take too long, but it is sort of redesigning our app to a new template. And I suppose another thing I should talk about are these outputs. So this would tell you what's actually happening under the hood. Claude was also telling us, so in this case, all the development is taking place on the cloud, but you can get an idea of what's happening under the hood.
Dr. Zafi, may I have a question?
Yes, please.
So while the Google AI Studio suggested with the different templates, in that case, does it require to have some credits or tokens, and does it use your credits to just show you the variations, or it's just when you submit it, only then it utilizes your credits?
So it would be utilizing some credits, but the thing is, Google AI Studio provides quite a generous free plan. So if someone wanted to start vibe coding for these web applications, I would actually recommend them to start playing with Google AI Studio. It's free, first of all. It has its limits. So if you use it a lot, it would say that you're basically done for the day, and then credits would restart after 24 hours. But it's incredibly generous as opposed to some of the other tools which are available. Now, of course, when it's generating ideas, what it's actually doing is that it's sending the current information. So whatever interface we have at the moment, it would take a snapshot, send it through the API, and then a new design is suggested. So it is using credits per se, but the good thing is that it's free. So you don't really need to worry about it.
Thank you, Dr.
So in this case, let's say this is what our app is, right? And if we wanted to see how it is, things actually look good. So let's turn off the editor. And let's say I had an item and I wanted to search. In this case, I just have this. So let's add something else. I'll add, let's say Apple. I'm just writing this so that I can look for it. So can we then see it? Let's say fruits. And good. Right, so in this case, we actually see that the new app messed something up, which is actually very good because now we can ask it that I cannot add new notes. So let's try it one more time. Fruits, let's say apples. Does the color change work? So color change has broken. In some sense, it's not because we do see a bar over here. So it seems the color part is working. However, the aspect where some of the other part should work, that is entry, that doesn't work. So this is actually good. So let's prompt the AI to fix this. Let's say that I am unable to create new note entries. They aren't displayed. So let's go ahead. In some sense, I think it's better when we do see errors because then you get to see that everything just doesn't work perfectly. In the first instance, when it worked perfectly as we had desired, that was like a one-off thing. In most cases, we have to do this iteratively. So let's try to identify what errors it finds out. And I believe it should be able to debug this in fairly quickly.
I think you are filtering the items.
So just like the previous session, if there are any questions, please feel free to type it in chat. With vibe coding, we do need to sort of wait for the AI to figure things out and write code. So between our prompts, we'll have sufficient time to answer questions. Therefore, if there's anything you need to ask, please just type it in chat. We'll be answering that throughout this session. And that would also avoid the long silences that we may have. Right, so it has fixed an issue which was preventing us from creating new nodes. And it will also tell you what those errors are. So let's see if it has actually fixed those things. So I was adding nodes which were not previously visible. Now they are visible. And let's try this one more time. So let's create a new node, sports, and let's say football, cricket. And we're just doing this just to sanity check that everything is in order. And yes, it works. Now, what you'll also notice is that when we were creating app with Claude Code, we never really had to go through this sort of thing where we had to manually tell it that an error has occurred and the AI should figure things out. So obviously, there is a difference in terms of intelligence between models like Fable and Opus from Claude, as opposed to the models from Google. However, a new model from Google is expected any time now, so we can expect it to have better intelligence in near future. Until then, you will notice that with Google AI Studio, the intelligence of models is perhaps not to the level that you're expecting with Claude, for example. So let's say we have iterated through this application and we finally decided that, you know what, this actually looks good and I want to show this off to other people. as my MVP so that we can get their opinion about what should be improved. Now, what should be the process that we go with? There are ways that we can host it on different cloud-based services, but the benefit of Google AI Studio is that you don't need to leave this interface. So you can click on publish. And what this does is it will provide us an opportunity to host our app on the internet for free. So let's click on get started. Okay, so let's see. This really shouldn't be asking me for billing. Default project. That's strange.
Dr. Zafi, there is a arrow, like a SVG icon beside the default Gemini project.
Yeah, so the idea is that we really should not have to set up billing. So setting up billing would actually require us to enter our credit card details, because so with Google AI Studio, we can actually host 2 apps for free. So we really shouldn't have to do this. Let me try to figure this out. What's actually changed between the 2 runs? So let's say publish. So no billing setup. I mean, that's how it should be. And if we click on this, it actually asks me to set things up. So as long as it doesn't require a credit card setup, it should be okay. Let's try this once more. So we don't want to be doing that. Let's see what's changed between. Let's see what's actually changed between the 2 iterations. So we have the application. And we should be able to publish it for free. Right. So what I'll do is, it won't be a smart idea to be entering my credit card details on a recorded session. So what I'll do is, let me go through my other account, and I'll just show you how to publish the application from there. And I'll try to figure out why it's actually asking for credit card details. So let me go here. And I'll go to my apps. And let's say we have notes. So this is like a similar application of notes. We'll just let it create a preview. And let's see if it works from here. So this is how it's supposed to actually show. The idea is that you should not have to pay for hosting any web application onto AI Studio. So the way it works, and please do try it at your end as well. The way it works is that if you develop an application, we can basically host for free using AI.studio subdomain. So let's say I make it the name of my notes, and we'll have to wait whether the particular URL is available or not, because anyone can create a web application and then host it on the subdomain of ai.studio. However, if someone already has had an idea of their website name as my notes, then it would not work. So let's see if I can name it as my notes 123. Is that available? Well, as it turns out, it is available. And then I'll click on publish application. So we'll just wait a few seconds for it to actually publish. And then it will tell us that our application has been published. So it's verifying the URL that it works.
Dr. Safi, while it's deploying, if we may have a question from a participant. She asked, can I buy domain on Google AI Studio?
So you can as well, but you should be getting it for free. Even if you have a free account, you will be getting 2 domains for free, and you really don't need to be buying it. But if you want to buy it, you can as well. But what you'd probably also want to do is to just map your own custom domain. So let's say rather than mynotes.ai.studio, it could be mynotes.com, for example, if that particular URL is available, if that domain is available. So let's see if it works now. Still doing checks. Okay, so it's done. And I have gone for this URL. So my notes-123.ai.studio. The thing is, because these domains are now available and they have been available for the past 2 weeks to anyone who works with Google AI Studio, so a lot of useful domains would have already been picked up by someone. So you sort of are limited to the domains which are available. But like I said, rather than ai.studio, you could get your own mynotes123.com. Now, if you're on the free plan, this should be fine. But especially if you are on a paid plan, I'd be very careful about exposing this Gemini API key. On the free plan, you get to have a certain usage of Gemini API for free. So you won't be charged for it. If limits are reached, then you won't be able to use it. But if you have a paid account, then be very, very careful about exposing this. Because if someone gets access to this key, they could use it for API calls, and basically you'll end up having to pay for it. So let's click on this URL. So these are the notes we've gone for. And I'll just copy this in chat so you can also look into this. So this is the first way of publishing applications in Google Gemini. So the idea in Google AI Studio, so the idea is that we can start from scratch, we can write up the code, and then we can begin to host it on an ai.studio URL. Another thing that we can go for is sort of look into the application that we developed last week. And we can also begin to host it. So let's look into what we developed last week, which was a budget tracker application. So let's see how it looked like. Now, because this did not have storage of data, it did not have synchronization, so we start with no entries at all. But we sort of knew that this is how it's going to be. Therefore, we added options of import and export. Now, if you recall, in the last session, we had asked Claude to generate synthetic data so that we can look into the dashboard. And I had downloaded the synthetic data in a folder that is available to me. So this budget tracker entries is the synthetic data. So I'll just copy the path. And then I'll import this data inside. So this data includes 830 entries. Let's import them all. So now we have our web application with the synthetic data so that we can take a look at the dashboard we developed. So we have a variety of statistics that we thought were useful, and we added them in our web application. We then have bar charts for income versus expenses, and these are mapped to a variety of things. So for example, these are for last 12 months. We can also view them in terms of categories. We can view them in terms of charts, and we can also view them in terms of a table. We had added another feature on the dashboard that we want to see where, for example, money went in each month over a 12-year period for which category. So let's say for rent and mortgage, again, this is synthetic data. If we click on this particular section, we'll find details of this. Now let's go for an entry which seems to have a lot of entries. So should we go for shopping? So if you click over here, you will see that we have all the logs of items that were in the category of shopping. Now, just as this works for expenses, it also works for income. So we'll have sections for income appear in the same way. So let's say we had developed this web application. We're quite happy with it. It has features that we really desire. But now we want to share it with others. Or for example, I want to use it on different devices. I want it to be available on my phone. I want it to be available on my laptop and so on. So how do we make this publicly available? Just as we had this Notes web application publicly available for everyone, how could we make our application that was developed in Claude also available on AI.studio? So in the next context of AI Studio, that is what we want to be doing. So let's get started with that. Now, the way this works is I will first look into the code that I have available for this application. So this was actually generated by Claude, and I had saved it in the folder of Claude in my D drive. Not everything in this code is meant to be updated, is meant to be uploaded onto the internet. So we have to be a bit careful of this. Now, the way we will synchronize code from Claude and bring it to Google AI Studio is through a service called as GitHub. For those who do not know GitHub, I'll briefly say that GitHub is a cloud-based web platform which is used by software developers to store, share, and manage their software code. And if you are doing any MVP web development, I would say GitHub is an essential tool for you. Now, this won't be a tutorial on GitHub, but I'll still share some of the basics. So you have to go to github.com and create your account. And after that, you can create on a new repository. Think of a new repository as a folder on the internet where you can paste your code and you can synchronize it accordingly. And at the very first end, you would have to type the repository name. So let's say I will write budget tracking web application. We can write a description. So let's say a demo of MVP web app and some of the other things which could be very necessary and important depending on how you see it. If you want your app to be private to you and not publicly available on the internet, please click on private. In my case, I will not make it private. I'll make it public so that you can take this source code and essentially repeat what I'm going to do. So in order to make sure that it's accessible to you, all of you, I will let it be public. So once you're sure about settings, we'll click on create repository. You will also see some other features. For example, there we can add a git ignore file. As I mentioned, not everything that is available in this folder is meant to be uploaded on GitHub. And you can sort of select this using through a git ignore file. In this session, I won't talk about it. Let's try to keep things simple. You could also add a license for your work, whether it's freely available, it's truly open source, or whether it has restrictions on, for example, commercial usage. Again, for this particular thing, we don't really care about license either. This is just a demo application. So once we enter the details, in particular the repository name, we can click on Create Repository. And now we can click on Uploading Files. So what we can do here is that we can upload certain files and folders onto GitHub so that it's basically on this cloud-based platform. Now, I, for example, know which files need to go and which need not to go. If you don't really know about it, Claude actually tells, for example, GitHub what should and should not go on the internet. But in this case, let's first just manually upload it. So if you look at these folders, the first folder would be settings for Claude. We then have a folder of data where we have this synthetic data. We're not really going to upload the synthetic data on Claude because we already have a feature in our application where we can import CSVs. So what I'll do is we'll get the app ready, and then I'll just share the synthetic data in the chat, and you can use import CSV to upload it. Besides data, you'll find a folder of node modules. Now, you are able to see this web app on the local server because it is being hosted. And in order to host it, this node module server contains all the files and folders required to host that web app. If you are deploying it on the internet, you don't really need to upload it. Then the main source folder is this public folder. This is the first folder which needs to go on GitHub. So we just drag it over here so that it's actually uploaded. Some of the other files that we need to upload are packages. So package JSON file, package log. The README file actually contains information about this web application, and we may want to upload it as well. I'll also upload server and the Vercel file. I'll talk about Vercel in a bit. So Vercel is an alternative to hosting your web applications on the internet. Once we are done with AI Studio, I'll show you how you can host your application on Vercel using GitHub. So I'll drag these files to GitHub upload section as well. Once it's done, I'll click on commit changes. Now what this does is that it brings these files onto GitHub, and now they are stored in this cloud platform. If you want to check these files, I'll paste the URL link over here. So now that our web application per se is on the internet in the form of GitHub, I can ask AI Studio to connect with my GitHub for this user, and then fetch the code from here and then host it on the AI Studio. This looks like a complicated process, and in some sense, it might seem like that, especially if you're doing this for the first time. But if you do it for a couple of times, you'll see it's incredibly easy. Now, this README file that we uploaded, it actually had information about the app using a file format called as Markdown. And this would be useful for you, especially if you want to study what the app is about. Now let's go ahead and upload this application onto AI Studio. So I'll go to Start. And I'll just make sure that I'm working from my main account because there are no issues there about hosting web applications. So I'll go for building products. So let's say add files. And I'll click on import from GitHub. So I could have started the application again from scratch, but given how long actually a good web application takes, this time around, I'll just import it from GitHub and bring it to the AI Studio. So I'll click import from GitHub. And it's already connected to my GitHub. So it tells me there is an application by this name. And that's exactly what we just uploaded. So let's import it. So what AI Studio would now do is that it would go through the code base. It would just sanity check that everything that is required is actually there. If it finds that some things are missing, AI Studio would try to fix those things. So let's say if it finds an inconsistency, it would try to fix it. I don't really expect there to be an inconsistency because this code was written by Opus and Fable, which are like the best models out there for programming. So until we wait for this, if there are any questions, just please feel free to add in chat. So it has rendered the web application. It is still doing some checks. And once it's done, we will know. And we can actually then begin to host it. But if there are queries, please feel free to post it on chat. Did we miss anything? Rawal, did we miss any question?
No, Dr. Zafi, not yet.
Okay. Right, so we have a notification. Right, so it recognized it's a Node.js web app. It's recognized a framework. There's no package manager. And everything looks good. So now what we have is a web application which resides in Google AI Studio. So what we did, we took this application from Claude and we brought it to the AI Studio format. And just as a sanity check, you can see things actually works. For example, we can switch from light to dark mode. We have a dashboard. Of course, there are no entries, so it's empty for now. If we wanted to, what we could do is to import CSV, but let's not do that. Let's just try to publish the app. And once the app is on the internet, we'll try to import CSVs from there. So let's go to publish. In this free account, I should be able to publish one more app. So again, it's not really asking me for payment permissions on this account. So we probably need to look into why it was asking on the other account. Now, it would suggest me name for this web application. And I think I'll just go for the default name because at the end of the day, this is still a demo application and it's not the final MVP that I would be publishing. So let's click on publish your app. And now it would go through the process of making sure everything is in correct order. And finally, the web application would be hosted on Google Cloud. So let's close some of the other tabs. Right, this is done. And by the way, if you have already published 2 applications like we have now, and you think of a new application to publish, you can go to the same Google AI Studio web app, and you can click on Unpublish Apps. So this way, you sort of can keep switching between the 2 free use cases that you have. So let's click on this. And this is our web application. And since we have not implemented any synchronization, so everything is empty, which we expect. So I'll paste this link in chat so that you can access it as well. And you can try to add entries and play with it. So let's say our app is now on the internet with this particular URL. One option, of course, is to start entering with different entries, but with a few entries, we won't really get a good enough dashboard. So I'll copy the path of where my sample data is. I'll click on Import CSV. Let's go to here. And let's import these entries. So it has imported 830 entries. And what we'll have is basically a populated dashboard once it eventually finishes loading. Now, when you try this app, you will again have to start from an empty application and you won't have this data. But what we can probably do is to find a way that we can share with you this particular sample data. I don't think we can over here, but I'm sure we can figure something out later on. We can probably send it to you via email. So this is how you can go ahead and bring in an application that was originally not designed with AI Studio, but at the end of the day, you now have a URL which is based on AI Studio, which is absolutely free, and it's still based on AI Studio. Now, let's say you eventually want to test with AI Studio, but you want to go for some other hosting service. How do we go ahead and do that? Now, the good thing is once your application is on GitHub, we can actually use any service. So another quite a useful service, intuitive service, which also has a fairly generous free tier is Vercel. So you'll have to register with Vercel. And the way that you can add an application here is to go on Add Project. And by the way, as someone asked, what if I want to add a different domain in Vercel? You can do it easily. So let's go to Project. And what I'll do is I want to bring in the source code from GitHub. So we have import Git repository. If this is the first time you're using it, you won't have GitHub app installed. So I'll click on Install. I'm already signed into GitHub. I'll say Continue. It will ask me whether I should provide it access to all of my repositories or only a select repository. It's always a good idea to only provide access to select repository. Then it will ask which repository, and this is the one that we just uploaded. And then you can click on Install. It will just confirm the password. Let's do that. So it will ask us to continue again. So sort of does a re-authentication. And once it's done, it's again asking, what do we want to do? Do we want to import it? Of course, we want to import it. And here you can provide a URL as well. What you will notice is that by default, the URL from Vercel is slightly uglier than the URL that you'll get with AI Studio. So let's just stick with the same URL, same basic name, and click on Deploy. So similar to how AI Studio was basically building the web application for us and hosting it onto AI.studio, now Vercel is doing the same thing. And Vercel also lets you basically use to deploy two URLs, two web applications for free. And after that, you have to begin paying it. So this has been developed. And because our name was unique enough, we've got it on vercel.app. So just as it was the subdomain of AI.studio for Vercel, it would be vercel.app. I'll share this in the chat as well. So after this, it's the same thing. You can import CSVs just as a backup, and then you can test things out. So these are the ways in which you can create the source code for web applications using Claude Code like we saw last week, or using Google AI Studio like we saw this week. And then we also looked into how we can deploy web applications using AI Studio, which I think is the easier part. But if you wanted to deploy web applications using Vercel, now you know how that could be done as well. Now, from an MVP perspective, you will probably notice a limitation in the sense that if we are developing a web application, in this case, a budget tracker, we are still having to manually upload our data. We can also export it, by the way, which would let us download the CSV file. But in reality, we don't want to be doing this over and over again. We want these applications to be synchronized across devices. So even though the web application is on the internet, my data could be different from your data because the data at this moment just resides in the local storage of browser. So what we'll be doing in the next session is to add database synchronization, so that regardless of whether you are using the application on your phone or your laptop, or maybe a third device, the data would be synchronized throughout that. Another thing an MVP requires is authentication. If you are developing a really useful MVP and you want only validated users to be using that MVP, you would like to implement authentication. So those are the two things that we would like to see in the upcoming week. In fact, it would be on Saturday, I believe. So this is it regarding this session. If there are any queries, please feel free to ask. This session, I know, was a bit more technical, but it also involved this most important part, that if you are using vibe coding to create a web app, how do we actually bring it on the internet?
So participants, if anyone have any question, because I hope that you also have been developing such products, such applications. So while you try to build such applications yourself or for your company, for any use case, and you're facing some problems, or if you have some stories you would like to share with us, please, you may unmute yourself, or you can chat, you can write in the chat, and we will be taking your questions, and Dr. Zafi will be addressing them. Also, Dr. Zafi, while participants write down the questions, as you just showed us that through the Vercel we can publish our applications. Let's say whether it's through this platform or through the GitHub, for how many days Vercel let us publish that app?
So if you're generally using it once a week, even if there's a single hit, you can. But what people can do is to just look into their usage limits, because they keep on changing. I wouldn't like to give a definitive answer. So you can just look into what is their most latest recommendation. Generally speaking, things work. If you're developing an MVP, there's at least one user who's clicking on the link at least once a week. So things generally work fine. I guess it is sort of pertinent because it's a related matter. So if, on the other hand, we were to synchronize it with a database, for example, Supabase. Supabase actually requires that an application like Supabase database be used at least once a week. Otherwise, it says it's going to pause the application. But even if the application is paused for a decent amount of time, they will still store your data. But really, that part is something that we'll be talking about next week when we go into authentication, synchronization, and stuff like that.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. So if there are no more questions from our participants, we may request everyone to please turn on your cameras so we can have a group photo, which will be marked as your attendance, because I read so many issues that our participants are facing while marking their attendance. I can see so many faces. Please turn on your camera for just few minutes, and I will wait for the rest of the participants, just giving them 1 more minute, just to ensure that everyone get the chance. So So thank you everyone for joining this session. And I myself learned so many things. Nowadays, coding is much more fun. And
is.
with the variations that Google AI Studio provided you, it's very easy to build such applications. So thank you, Dr. Zafi, and thank you everyone. We'll be having our last session on
Thank you.
you all on Saturday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of today.